Thank you. All right. So going back again and to the basics of this whole hearing, we're trying to gather ideas from you, lessons you've learned, so that when we're writing legislation or working through policies for the future for federal agencies, what we need to learn from what you've done. We'll gather obviously what they have experienced for the last couple of months and try to apply this in future policies. So let me ask some very basic questions. All of you have been through this in different forms for a while, but this is a very different type of year. I've heard quite a few companies say, well, you know what, we're finding good success in teleworking more so than we thought we would. And then they put this caveat in there, except when we're hiring new workers. Because the people existing teleworking now that you've added so many that are teleworking, they have previous relationships, they're used to collaborating. But when you add a new person or a new group of people into this, trying to learn each other, figure out how to collaborate, integrating into the culture of your business, that's a very different experience when all of their experience has been telework, and all the people that have physically collaborated now don't know what to do with this new person that's teleworking. So let me pick your brain on this a little bit. For long term, are there lessons that we can gain from this on integrating new people into your culture when all of the relationships are telework relationships? Any or all of you can answer that. If you've got input for that, we need it.
Yes, I can start with that because we hired majority of our employees in that way remotely. Employees I've never physically met or been present in the same room with. So it first starts with thinking through your onboarding experience or your employee, day one experience. And most important for us at Reconciled was, what is an employee experiencing in the first day, first week, and first 30 days of being here, and how do we set them up for success? So we leverage technology to do that. We created a dashboard where we literally outline all the different steps of what they're going to experience in those first 30 days, what their different days are going to look like, the training they have to go through online. We require every employee to set up video meetings with others in the company, even if it's not related to their work, just so that they start interacting with other coworkers and other team members in the company. We also have required meetings with different managers, different leaders in the organization, and they do go through a pretty thorough video orientation with the head of HR as well as their managers in the several times that week during the first few days. So it is important to think through intentionally, what is the employee experiencing? What is it like? What are things that they need to see on video? What do they need to see in physical documentation? What can be a quick email? And really try and create what I call a kind of Disney-like experience. How can you wow them, even in a virtual setting? And we often have employees say they feel more connected in that experience virtually than they do at most places they've worked physically. So we know the results speak for themselves when we get that feedback from employees. So it's really that intentional investment, very similar to what you would do to invest in a customer experience, on how do you make a customer feel like they really are connected with you and can trust you. You have to do the same thing, or if not more, with a virtual employee.
Okay, very helpful. Who else?
This is John. I'll just second what Michael Lee said. It really is about being intentional. We've onboarded a number of employees since COVID. First time in my life, I've not met them in person, quite disconcerting at the beginning. But once they start, we have a very robust onboarding session. We have teams that keep Zoom sessions on all day so that people can interact, ensure those video meetings. I personally will send them a message on Teams to say, I'm right here if you ever need anything. So remove those layers that I'm not the big inaccessible guy. And it's worked out very well for us.
Okay.
So I'll just take just to add one other point. I agree with everything that's being said. We're being very successful in some unusual circumstances here. But I would add that when we beat this virus and we get to our new normal, my personal perspective is that the need for some level of in-person interaction is important for continuing to cultivate an employee experience and a culture, which is why we think about our workplace facilities in the 4 quadrants that I spoke about earlier. It's this dynamic movement across those where you can have different experiences and different interactions. Technology is a fantastic game changer, particularly right now in COVID-19. But I am a believer in some level of human interaction as well.
So, Sean, you're saying that you're going to keep those 4 quadrants even after this. And it's your expectation that you're going to have, if I remember them correctly, collaboration, that you'll have a home, alternative place, and then there's one other, the field was the 4th one, if I recall correctly. Do you anticipate you're going to still have those 4 quadrants even after this?
Yes, Senator. And it's recognizing that an employee may be doing different things at different stages in their career so they can move around those quadrants. And that we've got all of those taken into consideration as we're building the right platforms. And we're building those platforms on that experience as opposed to the platforms first.
All right. Lane, where are you as far as trying to be able to onboard people during this time period? Any lessons that you've learned that would help us in the federal workforce?
Yeah, we're onboarding people as we speak. I think this boils down to leadership, frankly, and intentional touch points. So I lead a team that even before the pandemic was not on the same floor as I am here in Tulsa. And the majority of the team wasn't even in Tulsa. They were spread across 4 different states. And being very intentional about getting them in front of leadership through town halls, for example. We're now doing monthly town halls as opposed to before we were doing quarterly town halls, making sure that they get a feel of the culture from the leadership. And then as a leader, making sure that you are having those intentional interactions with your team, and also making sure that your team members are having intentional interactions with themselves. And then you cascade that down through the organization. We probably have 5, 6 layers here at Williams. So we have to make sure that our supervisors, who might be managing a team of 8 or 9 people, either out in the field or in an office, are doing the same thing, that they are talking to and visiting with and having collaboration sessions with their teams, and also making sure that their team members are doing that. And when you bring somebody new on board, that is even more critical, that you build in an expectation that, hey, you've got a new team member, you reached out to them. Have you had a video conference with them? Have you talked to them? Do you know anything about them? Have you gotten to know them in any way? And so I think it's really just about very intentional leadership.
So let me drill into this a little bit more for all 4 of you, if any of you want to be able to answer this. Has your perspective changed, or maybe it has not? And I'm interested to be able to know what that might look like, that there are certain positions that you will no longer hire those within a geographic area. For certain tasks and certain jobs, you know that they're very capable of teleworking from anywhere in the world for that mindset, but at least anywhere in the country. Is there a perspective that you have that in the future there will be certain jobs that you will hire remotely, find the best person no matter where they live, and have them permanently work not in an office space?
Yes, I can speak for the accounting industry. My peers who were not previously doing telework or remote work and believed that wasn't possible and saw what we did, said, I'm not sure how that's possible. Have been forced to. And they're finding a lot more efficiency, a lot more productivity when they implement the best practices around it. Senator, I was watching a YouTube video of yours on YouTube. I was really inspired by this daily interaction or weekly interaction you have with different people from your home state that visit DC, and you have coffee with them. And I was thinking to myself, wow, imagine being able to have that kind of coffee virtually with people all over the world that are from your home state, and be able to answer questions and connect with them both formally and informally. And that's what we do also. That's what I recommend also for most companies who go to remote work. Is an example is we have a daily virtual lunchroom. Anybody can jump into that virtual lunchroom. Everyone has lunch, right? Has a meal. And so they can go in and interact with one another and not even talk about work. Or we do the same thing with coffees with the CEO. I have a weekly coffee where any employees can jump in and have an informal time with me. As Lane said, all those interactions take leadership. It takes modeling, and brings kind of that aspect of the culture that you're trying to build that normally happens in an office. But there are definitely roles we're hearing from clients as well as from peers in the accounting industry which is very slow to move in regards to technology, that are surprised at how well it's working, and how now they're expanding the different locations they're willing to hire from.
Okay, that's helpful. Let me ask about merit-based affirmation. For someone that's remote working, it's harder to be able to stop by their cubicle or stop by their office compliment them on the work that they're doing. That has to be a very intentional thing for a leader or manager to be able to do in that situation. It's also when you talk about raises, when you talk about promotions, it's difficult to be able to do when you're not interacting with that person, when you're literally getting data about that person's performance rather than interacting with them to be able to know what they're doing. How are you handling merit-based affirmation, whether it be promotions, raises, whatever that may be?
So, Senator, this is Lane again. I mean, it's sort of much of the same. I mean, I insist that all of my performance reviews and all the performance reviews of my team, if the person is not there in your office, and obviously they're not now, that's got to be done by video conference. It's got to be done face to face. You need that interaction. And I think even after this pandemic is over, if you have people that are working remotely, as Sean said, I think you got to get them all in together on an occasion. And it's obviously better to have those discussions in person. But if you can't, adding the face on the video is a big benefit.
Yeah, are you adding some sort of metrics that you're trying to track performance with, or how are you handling that? Is there a piece of software that's been useful to you to be able to evaluate the performance or quotas, whatever it is that you're putting on individuals in the field, to be able to know customer service responses? Just how do you manage that?
Yeah, so we've used that sort of collaborative software for a very long time in terms of our sales representatives, the people in the field who are supposed to be out interacting with customers. From a high level in the office environment with lawyers, HR professionals, accountants, that sort of thing, we don't get down to the individual level. I think there may be some privacy issues you have to think about there, but we do track that on a very broad level. And as I indicated in my testimony, we've been able to get a pretty good handle on the fact that our employees are utilizing this collaborative, the teleconferences, the chatting, that sort of thing, on a much higher rate than they were before. And that gives us some comfort that these interactions are occurring.
Okay. Other input from other individuals?
This is John. I can add that my experience has been that employees really like having ownership and measurable goals, right? Because it sets expectations appropriately. And in most cases, when you can't assess whether people are doing their job or not, part of the problem, or even in some cases, most of the problem, it's the manager themselves who haven't really thought through what they want them to do and how to measure it. It's hard, but once you do that, then these questions, I haven't heard from James Lankford in 2 days. I wonder if he's actually working. They come up very, very rarely because you just look at the results or the output. And so that's what we've focused on, and it's been pretty effective.
Great. By the way, I know James, he is working.
Okay, good.
Anyone else?
Senator, I would just add, and I referenced this in my opening remarks, that designing a performance management system that is built around regular interactions between a supervisor and an employee is a builder of trust at the end of the day. And I think setting goals and reevaluating those goals through that system where you're having regular conversations and using data around it is incredibly important. And what I would also say is making sure that those goals are balanced. We like to think of them in not just quantitative terms, which is where it's easy to count, but also in qualitative, and concepts like leadership and agility, and looking at aspects of 360-degree feedback. All of these are important aspects to build that trust between a supervisor and an employee in a sort of modern performance management approach.
Okay, let me ask this. Several of you in your written testimony or in your oral testimony talked about increasing need for IT professionals, cybersecurity. John, you mentioned specifically the challenge of people working from a home system that you have no idea how that router was actually set up, the security settings that are there. They're working at unsecured networks at a coffee shop at some point. There's a lot of cyber challenges there. Are there any lessons learned that we should be able to be aware of on the federal side that we could implement?
I'll start. Absolutely. So I'm glad you brought this up because one of the biggest challenges is there's a lack of cybersecurity experts within the country. Today, there are over 600,000 open positions. about 50% more than before COVID. And without the people, you have people, processes, and product. Without the people, you will not be able to implement a good, secure solution. And so where the federal government could help is getting those people trained. For example, I so believe in this that I actually created a charitable foundation called Acronis SCS Vets, specifically focused at taking our U.S. veterans and military spouses, getting them the nationally recognized certificates they need to get self-sustaining jobs in cyber. So it's a reskilling effort. It's been very successful. Unfortunately, my numbers are nowhere near they need to be to impact 600,000 people. But this is an area where I think the government can help a lot in providing cyber training to individuals who need to be reskilled or are willing to learn them to go work for all these businesses.
Okay. Other input from others? Michael, I think you mentioned this as well in your statement.
Yeah, I think the one thing is, as much as you control the endpoints, the laptops, the mobile devices that your employees are using, I would be hesitant to allow too many of your employees to bring their own devices, because you have less control unless you make them basically sign the device over to your company or over to your organization. So as much as you can basically protect, secure the endpoints as well as their home networks is important. And then monitor and make it really clear that employees need to let you know when they're traveling or when they're planning to work at a different location other than their home network, because that's where also cybersecurity threats and accidents happen, where they're in a public Wi-Fi setting, they're in the airport working, they're at a coffee shop working, and those networks aren't secure, and they forget to turn on their VPN like required. So just making sure that you have technology that alerts you when employees are in different IP settings or locations that are unsecure, and making it really clear that that there are strict standards that your company is going to abide by as people work and do remote work, and you want them to do it securely and correctly. And then who also they give access to their devices to. So often you give them a laptop and then they allow their kids, or maybe they allow a partner or family member to use it for web browsing or gaming. You want to make it really clear that those devices are for work, and that any other kinds of software or activities should be prohibited, so that it reduces the amount of cybersecurity threats, even for a small business.
So there are lockdown software, anything that you have that prohibits someone from getting online without using the VPN, or doesn't allow them to be able to download applications without having an administrator log in, or settings that you have created on that? Or I'm still interested in if they have a company laptop, but they're on a home Wi-Fi system. Their router may be 4 years old and unsecured. Do you require that the company also installs their router at home?
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you provide a stipend to cover the costs for all those things, or you yourself as a company cover those costs, and then and to ensure that those are installed correctly, and then with password protection that is secure, as well as that the laptops themselves have updated virus protection on a regular basis. And there is software that we use to be able to do that to the computers that we've given to our staff.
Go ahead, Lane.
Yeah, Chairman Lankford, a couple things. So when I was with the judiciary, I don't know if it's worth visiting with them or not, but we were already unable to add software to the laptops that we were provided by the judiciary. We here at Williams have VPN always on, so there's no choice. If you're on a wireless network, you're VPN'd into the network. And then finally, I would just say, record Michael's last answer, transcribe it, and get it out to every federal employee who's working at home.
Okay, we'll see if we can actually get that done, because that is very, very good advice. That's why we're gathering things at this point. Let me ask a question about personally identifiable information. All of you are in businesses that you're dealing with some information about individuals, obviously some more than others in accounting and background and such. Give an example. The State Department earlier this year, March, April, May, June, just stopped doing passports at all, had no system in place that if someone needed a passport, their passport expired, whatever it may be, they just couldn't get it because there was no structure in place with the State Department to be able to handle that kind of document in a remote setting. And so the alternative was just stop doing it. And we had about 1.7 million passports requests just back up immediately. Obviously, State Department's reevaluating that at this point, trying to be able to figure out how to do that. Multiple other entities, whether it be IRS, everyone else, multiple agencies in the federal government deal with very, very private or proprietary information through processes. Anything that you would say in particular dealing with documents, dealing with items that are personally identifiable information that you would teach the federal government to say, here's something to know about this and how to be able to protect that information, even if someone's working remotely? Or would you say there's just no way to be able to do it in current technology? You just can't handle it?
Well, I'll start. I've learned in software you can never say that you can do everything perfectly, but there are ways to mitigate the risk. First, the federal government has a great standard called Fips 140-2. There's a 140-3 coming out here shortly, which is about how to use encryption both at rest and at transport to protect data. We have Fips certified product. At my company, I bought Fips certified routers from Palo Alto Networks. So first, just implementing those standards will radically reduce the risk that personally identified information leaks. And that to me is straightforward. The other thing is segmenting networks and using that zero trust model where you control who has access to that information. I'm the CEO of the company. If you're one of my customers, I cannot get that information because I don't need it on a day-to-day basis. If I want it, I have to actually go make a request. So somebody can take these images and my voice and pretend they're me, but they still won't have access because I just don't have access. So there are a number of things you could do that reduce the risk to almost zero.
Other input? Okay, let me move on to another question then on this. There's a lot of conversation about telework that's in the efficiency standard, and most often it goes towards physical footprint, leased space, or owned space in a headquarters building at some point. There's some people will make their decision based on a footprint space and what that costs, just depending on the cost of real estate in a particular area. In Washington, D.C., obviously real estate is exceptionally high, but if you get into Oklahoma City and Tulsa and other places around the country, it's not a high cost. And so companies will make different decisions based on telework. My question to you is more than just physical space leasing or keeping that space open, paying the utility bills for it. Are there other areas of efficiency that you look at to be able to decide if I'm going to have a particular person teleworking, they're more efficient, they work better in a home setting or in a third location, if I can say it that way, at some point than they would in an office setting where they're just as efficient at that. And so we find other efficiencies or reasons to be able to have someone telework.
Yeah, I can answer this one. Before the pandemic and still even now, unemployment in the accounting industry was very low. It was lower than the historic unemployment of the country. So it was lower than that. And so one advantage to telework, and we actually didn't decide telework regarding footprint. We chose it because we wanted access to talent nationwide. We wanted to be able to combat against the lowest unemployment rate that we were seeing historically in accounting and finance. And we were able to access a workforce that traditionally can't go into physical offices, that's stay-at-home moms. So these are moms that need to be available for their school-age children. They're doing drop-offs and pickups. They have a 4 to 6 hour window during the day, and then they might have some flex time in the evenings or weekends to do the rest of their 40-hour week. That's allowed us to access a workforce that normally would not show up on unemployment rolls or not looking for actively for work traditionally in the accounting field. And so that's why the majority of our workforce is made up of stay-at-home moms and dads who want an alternative to the traditional workplace. So I would say for sectors that are looking for access to larger, access to more non-traditional workers, or access to workers that wouldn't normally apply for your job, this is a huge advantage for us in the private sector.
Okay, so what I've learned so far from the hearing today is we desperately need accountants, we desperately need IT folks. around the country. So if anyone is 21 years old and listening, that we've got two good career fields for you right now. Other ideas or other thoughts about efficiencies or reason to do teleworking?
Senator, I would just add that I think challenging ourselves to re-architect the job type in the first place is an important thing to think about. So, for example, thinking about a crowd-based model to solving particular challenges that an organization has, as opposed to one individual working for 40 hours a week in a more traditional setting, I think could have significant efficiencies. Somebody referenced earlier the State Department and the US military, and if you look at crowds associated with those two organizations, think about spouses in those two organizations. Those are usually underemployed individuals that have a lot to offer that could provide significant efficiencies to the US government using a different talent model.
Okay.
I would also add that the younger generation, well, my generation, or at least me, think of telework as up until COVID as a privilege, not a right. The younger generation just expect it, right? I'm always connected. I should be able to work wherever I am. So security concerns aside, similar to Sean, if you want access to the best talent and the fullest employee pool, you're going to have to enable telework.
Okay. Lane, I want to ask you one more quick question, and then I want to try to wrap this hearing up and get final input from everyone. Lane, y'all had to deal in the field with issues of rural connectivity. I know we've already spoken about broadband before, but other solutions and options that you've seen or that has been explored, whether it be satellite internet, whether it be phone hotspots and other things, is there anything else that you want to be able to contribute in dealing with areas where it's more difficult to be able to get access?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, and somebody else mentioned earlier the hotspots. So when we have somebody in the field that can't get good broadband access, and there's no doubt in rural areas, in Oklahoma and really anywhere in the country, the broadband access is not as good. It's not as robust as it is in more urban areas. The hotspots are the best solution that we have found. A not so optimal solution is that just don't use the video. But obviously we'd prefer to be able to use that. But I think that's the best solution right now until we get the better broadband service into rural areas.
Okay. Let me try to wrap this up if I can. Any input that anyone has, let me open this up to a very open-ended question. Any input from anyone that you want to make sure that you recommend to the federal workforce, regardless of what agency it is, when they're thinking about telework, to consider this in the process to be able to make sure we get it on the record?
The only final thought I had was because this is fairly new to many federal agencies, to think about this as small teams. So, from large organizations to small companies, everyone can look at their workforce as a makeup of small teams with managers, supervisors, and a small set of employees. If you're able to apply these practices in small teams, then it makes the idea or the hill to climb a lot smaller. It seems a lot doable. So think of small teams of half a dozen or less, where there's a supervisor or leader and their small team, and you're practicing remote work proposals that we've all stated, and the security protocols needed in that. It allows for better communication, better accountability, and quicker response time, as well as agility to move if you need to make changes during the pandemic.
Okay. Good input. Anyone else?
I would
add just one thing, and that is that human-centered design is so important when we're thinking about adapting policies, changing processes and different technologies. So really putting the lens on of the human as we start to think through these changes is a best practice.
Okay, that's helpful.
And this is John. I would add, as a federal government, thinking about some standards or best practices around telework and securing telework. You've heard a lot of great anecdotes here, but there are a lot of small businesses, especially in others, agencies, remote cities that could use that guidance in a way that's easy for them to consume.
Okay, thank you. Lane, any final comments?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just so easy to fall prey to out of sight, out of mind. And I think our biggest challenge, especially in a workforce the size of the federal government's workforce, you have to get your leaders to understand that as we move to more of a teleworking environment, they have to keep up those touch points. I know a lot of people have said that today, but that cannot be overstated.
Does your management structure have to be smaller, Lane, at that point? Do you have fewer people that you're managing to be able to do telework, or the same ratio still work?
Yeah, I really have not found that to be the case. I mean, you know, you gain some efficiencies like not commuting back and forth. You pick up some time here and there. People are more motivated oftentimes when they work from home. Some people are not, but we haven't found that we've had to reduce those ratios as long as our managers and supervisors and leaders are being efficient and proactive.
Yeah, quite a few people that I've talked to have said they have increased their efficiencies dramatically in their workforce because they don't have the travel time. They don't have other social distractions at work. They're able to just plan their day a little bit differently. And quite frankly, get up, get going. They've got more time to be able to read the paper, catch up on news, catch up with their family, and not commute, and then start on time and take off. And less stress depending on the city that you live in and what your commute is normally like back and forth. It's a pretty significant change for them. Plus, it's really nice for parents of small children. They are wonderful distractions, but you also get a chance to see some things that you would have missed before just in life for them. So there's some built-in rewards there as well with the little ones that are running around. Any final comments from anyone? Otherwise, I want to be able to wrap up, and I want to make sure I get anything else on the record that we need on the record.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I very much